too much time, brother.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
All right, FightHype.com here with the head honcho, my man Steven Espinoza, in his stomping grounds in New York City. Ryan and Tank did amazing. How amazing do you think this fight's going to perform?
Look, I think it's got the potential to be up there. Look, it's hard to match the social media reach and impact that Tank and Ryan brought to the table. But, this fight has all the makings. I mean, there's not a storyline, there's not an element that's missing here. Two of the best fighters in the sport, history, legacy, personal rivalry, all the ingredients to have a breakout sport, so like a breakout event. So I really think that this, I'm not setting any bars, but I'm not worried about what the pay-per-view does, because if you're a boxing fan in any casual way, in any minimal way, let alone the hardcore, this is a can't miss. If you're at all interested in boxing, this is one fight that you have to watch.
Is this a year, 2023, with the fights you've been able to make on Showtime, where we got to give you and Al Heyman your flowers, kind of thing? Is it, and also the critics would say, did you only make all these great fights because your back was against the wall, kind of behind the scenes? There's speculation.
Yeah.
No one really knows. But
right.
What do you say?
Yeah, I would say this. Look, I'll leave it to others to who to give flowers to, but I think objectively, this is, I've been in and around the sport for over 20 years. This is as good a year as any network has ever had in terms of what we've been able to commit. We're not done yet. And I've heard it. The silly conspiracy theories. The reality is, we were trying to make Spence Crawford last summer. We were trying to make Benavidez last summer. We've been working on these fights. It just sometimes happens. There's a little bit of luck about when they come together. The other element is these things tend to snowball.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said bad fights lead to more bad fights, and by the same token, good fights lead to more. And I'm not saying that that Errol and Terrence looked at anything else and said, look, they're doing big fights, I have to too. But there is a little bit of that fear of missing out. And it's sort of like, you're sitting at home and there's big fights happening. These guys are competitive. So if that provided an extra 2% of incentive to get it done, that's where it is. But, if I could space out fights that that per my own needs or the company's needs, that would be in some ways a great thing. Like I can save all the good fights when my contract is up and get a big raise. That's not how the sport works. No one really can facilitate when these fights happen. They happen on their own time.
And again, on the speculative stuff, how much different is the makeup of this deal than it was from the original one last year? And there's some speculation that because they got to take an upside of pay-per-view, that Ryan and Tank performed so strongly, and then that kind of lets you guys, is a stronger pitch at that point. Like, hey, look at all this money you can make.
The deal isn't that much different. What I would say is it's a very similar structure. No huge changes.
Like basically, did Crawford get a sweeter deal by holding?
No, I think what it was is when we came together after the disappointment last fall. That disappointment was a real motivating factor. All of us left a really sour taste in everyone's mouth. So when we came together, everyone sort of pushed another 5 or 10% past the level of comfort. So it's sort of like everyone went to the edge of their comfort level and said, look, I can't go further. It didn't happen. We came back together and everyone gave another 5 or 10%. All sides did. So that everybody's a little uncomfortable with the deal. Like everyone is giving up some things that they wanted. And I think in terms of the financials, actually, I think we were well enough down the line. We certainly had the financials settled well before Tank. So it's an interesting theory, and I see why people would say that.
Right.
But one of our initial, there was a rumor floating around, and it had some truth. There was 3 or 4 weeks before the Tank fight, an idea that maybe we could get it done and announce it for Tank, because we were already really done at that point. Turned out the last couple things took a little bit longer, so it didn't happen. But look, if anything, the financials were already done at that point. Maybe Tank and Ryan provides a little bit of comfort that the people who made this deal, they were slept a little bit better afterwards.
And just For you personally, Steven, you're very professional in these matters, but being that Errol Spence is the guy you brought up, you helped groom him to this level. When you sit in your seat July 29th, does part of you can't help but root for him in the fight? Not that you dislike Crawford,
no. Absolutely. Look, there's, certainly I know Errol, a lot better than Crawford. But what I try to do more than anything is root for a good fight. I mean, obviously there are some fighters that are closer to than others, and some that I have my favorites as a fan. But the reality is, what I'm rooting for mainly on fights that I'm working at is, I really don't have the mental capacity to root because there's so much else going on.
Business.
It's sort of like, making sure the pay-per-view is on track, the show is on track. And just making sure all those things are there. When I'm at a fight, if I go to Wilder Fury 2 or 3, I'm rooting for Deontay Wilder. We did 13 fights with him, but it's tough. That's sort of bottom of the list in terms of like where I spent my mental energy on these fights.
For such a good fight, the pay-per-view does better in the rematch than it even does the first time, right?
I think this is there's a fantastic opportunity, for the sport overall to grow. I think it's a really healthy place. I think there was concern a while back that, there was too much emphasis on the influencer fights, and that was growing. And I think what we've seen is these are not mutually exclusive. You can have that part of the business flourishing and have these big fights doing as well as we ever have in history as well.
Last one for me, Steven. We talked so much about Crawford Spence, almost forgot this. Please give it to me as much depth as you can on this one. Canelo Charlo. What's the chances that happens? Are you feeling like we get that fight on Showtime this year?
Look, I'm really encouraged by the fact that there have been discussions. I hesitate to get too excited because Canelo's doing and his team are doing what smart people would do. They're taking a tour and evaluating all the options, whether it was Bivol, whether it was Benavidez, Badu, Jack, Charlo. I'm glad that Charlo and Benavidez are in that conversation. Selfishly again, because I think those are, as a fan, the two fights I want to see most. But I wouldn't. It's hard to take anything as too momentous at this point because they're clearly in the early stages of trying to figure out which direction they're going. But it is encouraging that there's some really enticing options.
It's in play, maybe.
It's in play.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steven.
You got it.
Thanks, brother.
You got it.
Good catching up.